Hidden in the vast silence of the Colorado desert are drawings so large they can only be seen from the sky. These are the Blythe Intaglios, enormous figures carved into the earth itself, and they hold one of North America's greatest ancient secrets. By the end of this journey, you will understand the compelling theories behind these desert giants and why their true purpose remains a fiercely debated mystery. We will uncover who might have made them thousands of years ago without modern tools, and explore the startling possibility that one figure depicts an animal that should not have existed here. What does it mean to create a masterpiece you can never fully see? The desert kept its secret until the sky itself gave it away. In 1932, a pilot named George Palmer was on a routine mail flight from Las Vegas to the small town of Blythe, California. Cruising high above the endless, sun-baked expanse of the Colorado desert, he glanced down and saw something impossible. Stretching across the desert floor were enormous, coherent shapes. A human figure with outstretched arms, another that looked like a four-legged animal, lines that ran for hundreds of feet. From his vantage point, they were startlingly clear, but from the ground, they would have been nearly invisible, just shallow trenches in the gravel. Palmer was baffled. He had flown this route countless times, but he had never noticed these colossal drawings before. Were they some modern military project? A strange hoax. He knew he had to get a closer look. Landing in Blythe, Palmer quickly organized a small ground expedition. He drove out into the desert, navigating by memory from the air, and finally stood at the edge of one of the giant forms. The experience was utterly different. On the ground, the grand design vanished. He was simply standing in a shallow, rock-lined ditch, maybe a foot deep. To see the figure he had seen from the air, he would have had to walk its entire length, hundreds of feet, piecing it together step by step in his mind. It was an act of faith, trusting a memory from the sky. Palmer and others began to document the sight, but the true scale and artistry of the Intaglios resisted easy understanding from a human perspective. This moment is celebrated as the modern discovery, but that word discovery carries a heavy weight. For the indigenous Mojave and Quechan peoples whose ancestral lands these are, the geoglyphs were never lost. Their oral histories and cultural knowledge had likely preserved the existence and significance of these figures for generations, a living memory in the landscape that the aerial view merely translated into a form the wider world could suddenly see. So Palmer's flight did not uncover a secret the desert was keeping. It revealed a secret one world had kept from another. And with that revelation came the first, overwhelming question, a question that begins not with why, but with how. How do you create a portrait larger than a football field, using only stones and determination in an era without flight? The answer to that how is etched across 3 low mesas in a gallery of giants. To understand the scale of their achievement, we must walk the site not from the ground, but with the mind's eye from above, cataloging these monumental figures. The most commanding is often called the giant hunter or the creator, a human form stretching an astonishing 171 feet from head to toe. This figure lies on its back, arms at its sides, a being of immense serene power rendered in simple, confident lines. A short distance away lies another human figure, 95 feet tall, but with a strikingly different posture. Its arms are outstretched, as if in a gesture of offering or welcome, or perhaps frozen in a moment of dance or ritual. The contrast between the two is intentional and profound, suggesting different identities or perhaps different moments in a single celestial story. Then there is the quadruped, a 53-foot-long animal with a long, straight body and 4 distinct legs. From the air, it most closely resembles a mountain lion, a powerful predator of the region captured in profile. But this interpretation is where the first major mystery of the Intaglios begins to whisper, for some early observers thought its shape suggested a horse. This creates an immediate and fascinating puzzle. as horses had been extinct in North America for thousands of years before these geoglyphs were made, only returning with Spanish colonists centuries later. So is this a mountain lion, a creature of the present landscape, or is it a much older memory, a depiction of an animal from a time long before the artists themselves walked the desert? The question hangs in the dry air unanswered. Scattered around these central figures are other enigmatic forms, a graceful spiral that seems to coil in on itself, and various geometric shapes, rings and lines that intersect at deliberate angles. The technique used to create all of them was deceptively simple, yet required immense communal effort. The artists did not pile rocks to build up an image, they did the opposite. They carefully cleared the dark, sun-baked stones and pebbles, the desert pavement that carpets the ground, revealing the lighter, sandy soil beneath. This created a negative image, a drawing in light and shadow. Over centuries, the cleared lines have even developed a thin, protective coating of mineral deposits called desert varnish, making them slightly darker than the surrounding area again, a natural process that has helped preserve their borders. Each figure is a masterpiece of negative space, a design defined by what was removed, and this leads us to the creators themselves, the hands that moved those stones. Who were they, and what world did they inhabit that demanded such a colossal act of expression? To create such monumental art, the artists first had to survive the canvas itself. The Colorado Desert is a landscape of extremes, a stark and beautiful expanse where life is measured in endurance. This is the northeastern reach of the vast Sonoran Desert, a sun-drenched basin cradled by rugged mountain ranges. Summers here are a furnace, with temperatures regularly soaring above 110 degrees. Rainfall is a rare and precious event, measured in mere inches each year. The ground is a mosaic of cracked earth, hardy creosote bushes, and the iconic skeletal forms of ocotillo plants. It is, by any measure, a harsh and demanding place to live, let alone to undertake a project requiring hundreds of hours of coordinated labor. This context makes the Intaglios all the more astonishing. Why here? Why expend such vital energy in a place where every calorie and every drop of water is fiercely contested? The answer may lie in what this location offered, not in comfort but in connection. The site sits just a few miles from the life-giving Colorado River, a massive, winding artery of water in an otherwise parched world. For countless generations, this river was a highway. It connected communities, facilitated trade in shells, obsidian, and other goods across vast distances, and supported the villages of the Mojave and other indigenous peoples. The mesas holding the Intaglios rise gently above this corridor. From their summits, one can see for miles across the flat desert plains. This was not a hidden, secret place. It was a prominent billboard along a busy, ancient thoroughfare. The artists chose a canvas that guaranteed an audience, not from the ground directly beside it, but from travelers moving along the river or crossing the desert on established trails. They created a spectacle meant to be encountered, a landmark that said, "You are here in a place of significance," but this choice compounded the physical challenge. To make the figures, teams of people would have had to carry water and supplies up to these mesas, working under the relentless sun, carefully planning each massive outline with nothing but stakes, ropes, and shared vision to guide them. They moved tons of dark basalt rocks, clearing the lines by hand. This was an act of profound communal commitment, a statement so important that an entire community decided it was worth the immense effort. The location transforms the geoglyphs from simple art into a declaration. It tells us that the message was as vital as water and that it needed to be seen by anyone passing through this ancient crossroads. So we are left with a powerful creation in a punishing environment, a clear signal with a forgotten meaning. This forces us to confront the biggest question of all, the question that has haunted researchers since that airplane first cast its shadow over the giants. What was the message? The identity of the artists is etched not just in stone, but in the very soil and stories of the land. two primary groups stand as the most likely creators, separated by centuries yet connected to the same sacred ground. The first are the direct descendants who call this place home today, the Mojave and Quechan, also known as Yuma peoples. Their oral histories, passed down through countless generations, speak of the figures. For them, the intaglios are not mysterious puzzles, but part of a living cultural landscape. They are often associated with Mastamho, a powerful creator deity and cultural hero in their cosmology. In these traditions, the giant human figures might represent Mastamho himself or other ancestral beings, marking the place where he performed great deeds to shape the world and teach the people how to live. The animal figure could be Hatakulia, a mountain lion person who assisted in the creation. These stories are not mere legends, they are a deep historical memory encoded in narrative form, suggesting the geoglyphs have been known and revered for a very, very long time. But to understand the full scope of that timeline, we must look deeper into the archaeological record, to a culture that flourished long before European contact. This brings us to the Patayan people, a name derived from a Mojave word meaning the old ones. The Patayan culture thrived along the lower Colorado River and its tributaries from roughly 700 AD to 1550 AD. They are sometimes called the ancient Pueblones of the Colorado River, though their lifestyle was distinct from the cliff-dwelling pueblos of the Four Corners region. The Patayan were skilled hunters, gatherers, and farmers who utilized the river's seasonal floods. They left behind distinctive pottery, stone tools, and the remnants of brush structures, but perhaps their most enigmatic legacies are their geoglyphs and intricate rock alignments found throughout the desert southwest. Archaeological evidence firmly places the Patayan in the immediate region of the Blythe Intaglios. Scattered across the mesas and in the surrounding desert are sherds of their buff-colored pottery and stone flakes from tool-making, silent testimony to their presence. The style and technique of the Blythe figures, created by clearing rocks to reveal lighter soil, is consistent with other geoglyph traditions attributed to the Patayan across the broader region. This creates a compelling yet complex picture. It is entirely possible that the ancestors of the modern Mojave and Quechan peoples, the Patayan culture, are the ones who physically moved the stones, creating the figures 1,000 years ago or more. The oral histories of the Mojave and Quechan would then preserve the meaning and memory of that ancient act, a continuous thread of knowledge stretching from the hands that cleared the rocks to the voices that tell the stories today. So we are not necessarily choosing between two separate groups, but perhaps looking at a single, unbroken lineage where the creators and the keepers of the story are part of the same cultural continuum. This sets the stage for a profound debate, not just about who, but about when, and more importantly, how we listen to the different kinds of evidence the desert has preserved for us. This immense span of time, from 450 to 2,000 years, is not a sign of scientific failure, but a testament to the unique nature of the canvas. Dating the intaglios is one of archaeology's most frustrating puzzles because you cannot carbon date a line in the dirt. The figures were created by removing material, not adding it. There is no charcoal from ancient fires, no buried organic matter sealed beneath the lines, no datable pigments. The art is, in essence, a ghost, an absence made visible. So how do you pin a date on a shadow? Archaeologists have had to become detectives of indirect evidence, piecing together clues from the margins of the masterpiece. One method involves the very stones that were moved. The cleared lines have exposed rocks that have sat undisturbed for millennia. By studying the rate at which desert varnish, that dark mineral coating, reforms on the underside of these stones, scientists can attempt to estimate when they were last turned over. It is a slow, imprecise clock, but it points to great antiquity. The most compelling clues come from the ground around the figures. Scattered across the mesas are pottery shards and stone flakes, the everyday debris of ancient life. These artifacts can be dated through established methods. If a concentration of this material is found consistently associated with the geoglyphs, and if that material all dates to a specific period, it builds a strong circumstantial case that the people who left that debris were also the ones who made the drawings. The pottery found near the Blythe Intaglios is predominantly from the Patayan culture, suggesting that vibrant period from 700 to 1550 AD as the most likely era of creation. Yet, this evidence is not conclusive. The artifacts were found nearby, not directly under the lines in a sealed context. It is possible, though less likely, that the figures are older, and the Patayan people simply lived near and revered a landscape already marked by giants from an even more distant past. This is why the timeline remains so frustratingly broad. The geoglyphs could be a 1,000-year-old landmark from the Patayan zenith, or they could be twice as old, a relic from a time when the climate was different and other cultures walked the river's edge. This chronological fog forces us to rely on another form of evidence, one that does not come from a lab but from the land and the sky themselves. To narrow the search for meaning, we must look at what the figures might be pointing to, not just in the cultural landscape but in the cosmos above. The sheer scale of the task is almost beyond comprehension. To truly grasp the achievement of the Blythe Intaglios, we must step away from the aerial view and down into the dust to feel the sun and the weight of the stones. Imagine a workday that began not with a clock but with the first light of dawn, the only time the desert offers a brief respite from the heat. The tools were brutally simple. Sharpened sticks for prying, woven baskets and perhaps animal skins for carrying. The raw material was the desert floor itself, a tightly packed layer of dark, oxidized rocks and pebbles known as desert pavement. This was not a matter of piling stones to build a shape. It was the opposite, a monumental act of subtraction. The artists had to meticulously clear away this dark veneer, foot by foot, basket load by basket load, to reveal the lighter, creamy-colored soil beneath. Each figure is a drawing made of negative space, defined entirely by what was removed. Maintaining the proportions of a 170-foot human figure across the uneven terrain of a mesa would have required not just muscle but sophisticated planning. How did they keep the lines straight and the curves graceful over such a vast distance? While we cannot know their exact methods, the principles of basic surveying were well within their reach. A likely scenario involves a master artist or a small group of planners who first laid out the design at a smaller scale, perhaps on a smoothed patch of sand. Then, using long ropes made of plant fibers, they could have transferred the design to the grand canvas. They might have driven stakes into the ground at key points, the ankles, the elbows, the tip of the mountain lion's tail, and then used ropes to connect these points, creating the guidelines for the workers to follow. Someone, perhaps standing on a higher point of the mesa or using a series of aligned stakes, would have been the overseer, calling out corrections to ensure the emerging form matched the intended vision. It was a communal act of geometry and faith, trusting that these humble markings on the ground would coalesce from the right perspective into a giant. The labor investment is staggering to calculate. Let us consider just the largest human figure. Clearing a line roughly 1 foot wide and 1 foot deep for 170 feet means moving about 170 cubic feet of rock and soil. But the lines are not single trenches, they are the borders of a massive form. Accounting for the entire cleared area of the figure, the volume of material removed could easily reach into the thousands of cubic feet. Now picture a worker with a basket. Each trip to the perimeter to dump a load might take several minutes. Conservative estimates suggest creating just one of these geoglyphs could have required thousands of person-hours spread across weeks or even seasons of work. This was not the doodle of a solitary individual. It was a sustained, coordinated community project like building a temple, but a temple that existed only as lines of light on the earth. Every basket of stones carried away represented a shared decision that this image, this message, was more important than the immense effort it demanded. It was an investment in something that could not provide shelter or food or water. It served a different, profound need, and this realization makes the next question even more urgent. If the creation was this difficult, the meaning must have been equally powerful. What celestial event or sacred story was so important it needed to be written on the land itself, in a language of sunlight and shadow? The purpose behind such a colossal effort is the desert's most enduring riddle. Why would a community spend countless hours under a blistering sun to create art they could never fully see from the ground? The leading theories are not mutually exclusive, and each offers a compelling glimpse into a world vastly different from our own. The first and perhaps most intuitive idea is that these were sacred ritual sites, massive stages for powerful ceremonies. Imagine a gathering at dawn with participants standing within the lines of the giant human figure. From their perspective on the ground, they would be inside the form, becoming part of it, their bodies activating the outline in a way only the community itself could witness. Such rituals might have been pleas or thanks for something essential, like a successful hunt, symbolized by the mountain lion figure, or for the fertility of the land and the river. The geoglyphs could have served as a permanent, powerful location where the human world and the spirit world were believed to intersect, a place where prayers were literally walked into the earth. A second fascinating hypothesis looks not to the earth but to the sky. Could the intaglios be astronomical markers? Researchers have studied the alignments of the figures and the lines connecting them, searching for correlations with the sun, moon, or stars. One compelling observation is that the long axis of the largest human figure points roughly southeast, a direction that holds significance in the solar calendar. While no precise, undeniable astronomical alignment has been confirmed like those at Stonehenge, the possibility remains strong. The figures might not be a calendar in themselves, but a symbolic representation of celestial beings or creation stories written on the land, mirroring the patterns ancestors saw in the night sky. A more practical theory suggests they functioned as territorial markers or clan symbols. Positioned on high mesas overlooking a major travel corridor, these immense images would have been unmistakable declarations of identity. To any group moving along the Colorado River, the sight of these giants on the horizon would have sent a clear message. This land is known, this place is claimed, these are our ancestors watching. They were a signature written at a scale impossible to ignore, establishing a sense of place and belonging in a vast, open landscape. Underlying all these theories is a profound concept, the idea of communication with the unseen. For many indigenous cultures, the landscape is alive with memory and presence. The geoglyphs might have been a way to speak not just to other people, but to the deities like Mastamho or to the ancestors themselves. By creating permanent images of these beings on the land, the people were perhaps making them a constant part of the world, ensuring their power and guidance remained present. The very act of creation could have been the most important ritual of all, a communal prayer made solid. The frustrating and beautiful truth is that without a written record from the hands that moved the stones, we are left listening to echoes. We see the shadow of a purpose, but the full voice of its meaning is carried away on the dry desert wind. This ambiguity, however, invites us to look closer, not just at the lines on the ground, but at the one piece of the puzzle that seems most out of place, the animal figure whose shape whispers of an impossible creature. Among the silent giants, one pairing tells a story that seems to call out across the centuries. It is the large human figure, the one with arms outstretched, positioned in a deliberate relationship with the quadrupedal animal. From the air, the composition is dynamic, almost narrative. The human appears active, engaged, while the animal faces away, its long body taut. The most accepted and elegant interpretation is that we are looking at a hunter and his prey, specifically, a hunter and a mountain lion. In the cosmology of the desert peoples, the mountain lion, or puma, was far more than just a dangerous predator. It was a being of immense spiritual power, a master hunter revered for its strength, stealth, and grace. To depict such a creature on this scale was to acknowledge its vital role in the world's balance. The hunt itself was not merely a physical act of survival, but a sacred exchange, a ritual of respect between human and animal spirits. This geoglyph could then be a permanent prayer for hunting success, a map of that sacred relationship etched into the land, or perhaps a depiction of a mythic event where a cultural hero confronted the spirit of the lion. The figure grounds the art firmly in the known world of the ancient desert, a world where human and predator were intimately, spiritually linked. But there is another, far more disruptive reading of that same animal shape. Some early observers, struck by the quadruped's straight back, long torso, and distinct legs, saw not a crouching cat but a horse. This single interpretation, if proven, would shatter the established timeline. Horses had vanished from North America at the end of the last ice age around 10,000 years ago. They only returned with the Spanish expeditions of the 16th century. If the geoglyph is a horse, then the intaglios could not possibly be 1,000 years old. They would have to date to some time after Spanish contact, making them perhaps only 400 or 500 years old at most. This theory is controversial, and most archaeologists strongly favor the mountain lion interpretation. The evidence against the horse is compelling. There are no known historical records from Spanish explorers or later settlers mentioning such massive earthworks in this area, which seems a strange omission for such a striking feature. More importantly, the cultural context makes little sense. The introduction of the horse was revolutionary, transforming mobility and warfare, but indigenous artists depicting this new, powerful animal typically did so in a recognizable, detailed style on rocks and hides, not as a simplistic, generic quadruped in a possibly ancient style. The animal figure lacks key equine features like a visible mane, a tail of hair, or the distinct shape of a horse's head. It fits more cleanly into the older, symbolic tradition of representing the region's apex predator. Yet, the ghost of the horse theory persists, a tantalizing reminder of how easily our own perceptions can be projected onto the past. It forces us to ask, are we seeing the artist's intention, or are we seeing what our modern minds expect to find? This ambiguity is the heart of the mystery, protecting the true meaning within the simple, elegant lines cleared from the desert floor so long ago. Perhaps the giants were not meant to be seen from the sky, but to see the sky itself. The theory that the Blythe Intaglios are astronomical markers turns the desert floor into a vast, open-air observatory. To test this idea, researchers have had to become time travelers, calculating where the sun and stars would have stood above the horizon centuries or millennia ago. Their work suggests some compelling, if not yet definitive, connections. The long axis of the largest human figure, the one lying peacefully with arms at its sides, points roughly southeast. This direction is not arbitrary. It aligns closely with the point on the horizon where the winter solstice sun would have risen over the distant mountains during the Patayan period. If this alignment is intentional, it transforms the giant from a simple portrait into a living calendar, its body oriented to mark the year's shortest day, a turning point in the seasonal cycle crucial for a river-based agricultural society. Other lines and geometric shapes scattered around the site may have functioned as sight lines, pointing to the summer solstice sunrise or sunset, or to the rising of particularly bright stars like Sirius. The act of walking these lines during a specific celestial event could have been a profound ritual, physically tracing a connection between the earth and the heavens. One figure stands out in this celestial investigation, the graceful spiral. This form is a powerful, recurring symbol across ancient cultures worldwide, from the rock art of the American Southwest to the megaliths of Europe. Spirals are almost universally associated with cosmic motion, the cyclical journey of the sun, the phases of the moon, the endless turn of the seasons. They can represent a portal, a vortex of energy, or the path of life itself. At Blythe, the spiral is not attached to a human or animal form. It exists on its own, a coiled mystery etched into the mesa. Could it have served as a symbolic map of a celestial path, perhaps even tracing the apparent movement of a specific star cluster over many nights? Some researchers have looked beyond the sun to the deeper night, wondering if the arrangement of the major figures mirrors constellations important to the creators. The most common candidate is Orion, the Hunter, a constellation prominent in winter skies and often linked to creation myths. The two human figures and the animal could be seen as a terrestrial reflection of Orion's belt and sword, with the mountain lion representing a nearby constellation like Lepus the hare, the hunter's prey. Others have pondered whether the sprawling layout of the entire site might chart the misty path of the Milky Way across the dome of the desert night. Modern attempts to prove these astronomical connections face immense challenges. The exact original orientation of every line may have shifted slightly over centuries due to soil creep or minor erosion. Without a precise date of creation, calculating exact star positions becomes a game of probabilities. Furthermore, as one archaeologist has noted conceptually, with enough points on a landscape, you can almost always find some alignment with something in the sky by chance. The key is to find a pattern, a repeated and deliberate set of alignments that would have held meaning. So far, the evidence at Blythe is suggestive, not conclusive. It whispers of a people deeply attuned to the rhythms of the cosmos, who may have embedded that knowledge into their grandest art. Whether as a precise calendar, a mythic star map, or a more general celebration of celestial order, the astronomical theory invites us to see the intaglios not as isolated drawings, but as an integral part of a living, breathing universe. This perspective makes the site feel less like a monument and more like a conversation, a silent dialogue between the earth and the sky that has continued uninterrupted for 1,000 years. And if the giants were speaking to the heavens, they were also undoubtedly speaking to each other across a much wider landscape than we once believed. The Blythe Intaglios are not alone in their silent desert dialogue. To find their closest relatives, you must travel over 4,000 miles south to the arid plateaus of Peru. There, spread across the Nazca Desert, lies the world's most famous gallery of geoglyphs, the Nazca Lines. Placing these two sites side by side reveals a startling conversation across continents, a shared human dream written on the earth itself. Both are masterpieces of negative space, created by removing dark surface stones or pebbles to reveal a lighter substrate beneath. Both reside in harsh, rain-starved basins where the dry climate acts as a natural preservative. And most famously, both were designed on a scale so grand that their full forms only become coherent from an elevated vantage point, a perspective their creators almost certainly never had. They are cousins in spirit, separated by an ocean but united by a profound and puzzling artistic vision. Yet, look closer and the differences are just as telling. The Nazca Lines are often intricate, single continuous outlines. They depict hummingbirds, spiders, monkeys, and whales with flowing, unbroken lines that can run for miles, like sketches made with a single, impossibly large pen stroke. The Blythe figures, in contrast, are solid forms. The human and animal shapes are not outlines but filled in silhouettes created by clearing the entire interior area. This gives them a more substantial, monumental presence, like giants sleeping in the earth rather than wireframe drawings upon it. This key distinction speaks to different techniques, different cultural aesthetics, and perhaps different purposes entirely. For decades, this very similarity of scale and mystery fueled one of the most persistent fringe theories about both sites, the idea of ancient astronauts. The argument was seductively simple. How could ancient peoples create such precise, massive artwork intended for a view from the sky unless someone from the sky was there to guide them or to see it? The theory suggested the geoglyphs were landing strips or signals for extraterrestrial visitors. This narrative captured the public imagination, but it crumbles under a simpler, more human truth. It profoundly underestimates the ingenuity of our ancestors. We know the Nazca people could have used simple surveying techniques with stakes and ropes to achieve their precision from the ground. The same is true for the creators at Blythe. The aerial view was not the intended audience, it was a breathtaking byproduct. The true purpose was likely rooted in ritual, astronomy, or territorial marking, acts meant for the community and the gods, not interstellar travelers. This comparison, then, does more than highlight two ancient wonders. It underscores a universal human impulse. From the deserts of Peru to the river valleys of California, people have felt the deep need to make a mark, to inscribe their stories and beliefs onto the landscape itself. It is an act of connection, of claiming a place in the cosmos by collaborating with the Earth on a godlike scale. The Blythe and Nazca geoglyphs are not evidence of alien contact. They are monumental proof of a shared human desire to reach beyond our own horizon, to create something so vast it becomes part of the world's very fabric. And that act of creation always leaves a trace, not just in the soil, but in the stories of those who come after. The desert's silence is a fragile thing, easily shattered by modern noise. For centuries, the Blythe Intaglios survived the elements, but their greatest threat arrived on four wheels. In the decades following their rediscovery from the air, the site was largely unprotected. Off-road vehicle enthusiasts, unaware of the ancient art beneath their tires, saw the wide-open mesas as perfect terrain for recreation. Trucks and motorcycles carved new tracks directly across the fragile lines, their tires scattering the carefully placed border stones and grinding the cleared areas back into rubble. In a matter of minutes, a joyride could undo preservation work that nature had taken centuries to accomplish. The scars from this period are still visible today, a stark reminder of how quickly a 1,000-year-old legacy can be damaged by a single moment of ignorance. This wasn't malicious vandalism in the traditional sense. It was a collision of worlds where a modern pursuit of freedom unknowingly trespassed on sacred ground. The damage served as an urgent wake-up call, proving that the giants could not protect themselves from the very civilization that had just learned of their existence. Beyond the direct impact of vehicles, slower, more persistent forces are always at work. The Colorado Desert may be dry, but it is not gentle. Rare but powerful flash floods can surge through the area, scouring the landscape and threatening to wash away the shallow trenches. Wind-driven sand acts like a slow sandpaper, gradually softening the edges of the figures. Even the well-intentioned footsteps of visitors pose a problem. The simple act of people walking inside the lines to take photographs compacts the soil and dislodges the stabilizing stones, accelerating erosion one footprint at a time. The geoglyphs exist in a delicate balance, and every human interaction, however careful, leaves a trace. Preservation, therefore, has become a constant, careful negotiation between sharing this wonder and safeguarding it for the future. The turning point came in 1982, when the Blythe Intaglios were officially listed as an archaeological district on the National Register of Historic Places. This designation was more than an honor, it was a tool for protection. It recognized the site's profound national significance and opened doors for resources and legal safeguards. The most visible sign of this effort is the protective fencing that now surrounds each major group of figures. These fences are not meant to shut people out, but to respectfully channel their view. Visitors can walk along designated paths and viewing platforms, able to see the giants clearly without treading on their fragile forms. The ongoing stewardship is a collaborative mission led by the Bureau of Land Management, the federal agency that oversees the land, in close partnership with the Colorado River Indian tribes and other tribal nations. This partnership is crucial, blending archaeological science with traditional indigenous knowledge to guide conservation decisions. Their work is quiet and continuous, monitoring the site's condition, repairing storm damage, and educating the public. The goal is not to freeze the Intaglios in time, but to steward their slow conversation with the desert, ensuring the whispers of the past are not drowned out by the carelessness of the present. This ongoing vigilance raises a final, hopeful question. What can we, as temporary visitors to this ancient site, learn from the message so laboriously written across the desert floor? To walk among the Intaglios is to walk through a living story. For the Mojave, the Quechan, the Quechan, and the Colorado River Indian tribes, these are not abandoned puzzles waiting for an outsider's solution. They are sacred geography, places where history, spirituality, and identity are woven directly into the land. The modern scientific narrative of discovery often begins with a pilot in 1932, but the indigenous narrative has no such beginning because the knowledge was never lost. It is a continuum passed down through generations in stories, songs, and a deep, inherited understanding of place. In their traditions, the figures are often linked to the great creator deity Mastamho and the time of world shaping. The giant human forms might represent Mastamho himself or other ancestral beings, marking the very ground where they performed foundational acts. The animal is not a generic quadruped, it is Hatakulia, the mountain lion person, a powerful spirit who assisted in creation. This perspective transforms the site from an archaeological riddle into a chapter from a sacred text, written not on paper but on the body of the earth itself. This indigenous knowledge is not an alternative theory. It is the original context, the cultural framework within which the geoglyphs were created and understood for centuries. For too long, this vital perspective was sidelined in the mainstream exploration of the Intaglios, treated as folklore rather than as a valid historical and spiritual record. That oversight created an incomplete picture, one that saw the giants as mysterious orphans of a lost culture, rather than as revered relatives in a living one. Today, a profound and necessary correction is taking place. The tribal nations whose ancestors likely cleared those stones are now leading voices in the conversation. They are essential partners with agencies like the Bureau of Land Management, guiding preservation efforts with a wisdom that blends millennia of connection with modern conservation science. Their stewardship is holistic. It protects not just the physical lines from erosion and damage, but safeguards the spiritual integrity of the site. This collaboration ensures that management decisions respect ceremonial significance, that educational materials include tribal voices, and that the story told to visitors is no longer one of mere mystery, but one of continuous cultural reverence. It is a powerful model of how to care for ancient places by listening first to the people for whom they have always been home. When we center these indigenous perspectives, the fundamental question about the Intaglios shifts. We stop asking what they are for as if they were a tool with a single function, and we start to understand what they are. A permanent communal prayer, a treaty with the land, a way of saying we are here and our stories are part of this place forever. This realization invites a final, humbling reflection on what such a legacy means for us today, and what our own marks upon the landscape might say to those who come 1,000 years from now. The giants of Blythe do not stand in isolation. They are part of a much larger conversation whispered across the vast canvas of the American Southwest. Scattered throughout this arid region are other, lesser-known geoglyphs, each adding another piece to the puzzle of this ancient tradition. Just a few dozen miles north of Blythe, near the town of Needles, California, lies a site known as the Topock Maze or the Mystic Maze. From the ground, it appears as a confusing jumble of intertwining lines and circles etched into the desert pavement. But from above, its true form resolves into a stunning, intricate labyrinth. Unlike the solid figures at Blythe, the Topock Maze is a complex network of pathways, a design that seems intended not just to be seen but to be walked. Its purpose remains speculative, but many believe it served as a spiritual or ceremonial pathway, a physical journey meant to symbolize a metaphorical one, perhaps guiding initiates through a rite of passage or representing the winding path of life itself. Further north, in the dry lakebed of Winnemucca Lake in Nevada, we find a different kind of giant art. Here, the canvas is not the desert floor, but the vertical face of a limestone boulder. The Winnemucca Lake petroglyphs include some of the largest and oldest rock carvings in North America, with designs that may be as much as 10,000 years old. Among them are enormous, intricate patterns of dots and diamond chains, and most strikingly, a series of large, deeply carved pits or cupules arranged in geometric patterns. While not geoglyphs in the strict sense of being cleared earth drawings, they share the same monumental scale and enigmatic purpose, representing a parallel tradition of making marks on the landscape that dwarf the human form. These sites, along with others like the intricate gravel glyphs of the Mojave Desert, tell us something crucial. The Blythe Intaglios were not a singular, freak occurrence. They were part of a widespread, sophisticated cultural practice. Across hundreds of miles, different groups of people were engaging in the same profound act, altering the earth itself to create images and patterns that operated on a scale beyond everyday human perception. This suggests a shared way of thinking about the world, a common belief that the most important messages needed to be written not on perishable hides or pottery, but directly onto the enduring skin of the land. The specific symbols changed from place to place, a mountain lion here, a labyrinth there, but the underlying impulse was the same: to connect with the cosmos, to mark territory, to enact sacred stories in a form that would last for generations. Recognizing this regional tradition deepens the mystery of Blythe while also making it feel less lonely. It transforms the site from an inexplicable anomaly into a powerful regional statement, perhaps the most dramatic and well-preserved example of a language that was once spoken by many across the sun-baked valleys and mesas of the ancient Southwest. This single animal figure holds the power to rewrite everything we think we know. The horse controversy is not just an academic debate, it is a timeline bombshell waiting to detonate. If that quadruped is indeed a horse, then the entire narrative of the Blythe Intaglios collapses and reforms in an instant. Horses, as we know them, vanished from North America around 10,000 years ago. They only returned with the Spanish expeditions of the 16th century, with Francisco Vázquez de Coronado's entrada in 1540, likely being the first to bring them into the broader Southwest region. If the geoglyph depicts a horse, its creation could not possibly predate that contact. Suddenly, these ancient giants would become a relatively recent artifact, perhaps only 400 or 500 years old, made by indigenous peoples in the turbulent era after European arrival. The arguments in favor of this interpretation hinge on the silhouette. Proponents point to the animal's long, straight back, its parallel body lines, and its 4 distinct vertical legs. They argue this profile is more consistent with a grazing or standing horse than with the sinuous, arched posture of a crouching mountain lion. They suggest the figure's head, while simplistic, could be interpreted as equine. From this perspective, the geoglyph becomes a monumental record of a world-altering encounter, a native artist's awestruck depiction of the strange, powerful creatures that had just ridden into their world. Yet the evidence against the horse theory is substantial and compelling. First, we must look at how indigenous artists of the region actually depicted animals they knew intimately. In rock art from the same general area and time period, mountain lions are often rendered in a highly stylized manner. These representations emphasize the animal's long torso and tail, sometimes simplifying the form into a straight-backed, 4-legged shape not unlike the Blythe figure. The geoglyph may perfectly fit within this local artistic convention for portraying the region's apex predator. Furthermore, the figure lacks definitive equine features. There is no visible mane, no tail made of flowing hair, no suggestion of the distinctive shape of a horse's head with its elongated muzzle and alert ears. It is a generic quadruped which, in the context of the desert, points more logically to a mountain lion than to an imported novelty. Perhaps most damning is the silence of history. Spanish explorers and later settlers were meticulous chroniclers, yet no known record from the 16th, 17th, or 18th centuries mentions these colossal earthworks. It seems almost inconceivable that such a striking feature along a major travel corridor would go unremarked upon if it were a contemporary creation. The implications of the horse theory, however, extend far beyond mere dating. If true, it would force a dramatic rethinking of the site's cultural context. It would place the Intaglios in the painful dawn of the colonial era, a time of massive disruption, disease, and social upheaval. Creating such a huge communal project in that period would have been an act of profound resilience, a way for a people under immense pressure to reaffirm their identity and connection to the land by incorporating a potent new symbol of power into their sacred landscape. It would suggest a vibrant, adaptive cultural continuity, not a static ancient tradition frozen in time. Yet, if the figure is a mountain lion, the Intaglios stand as a purely pre-contact achievement, a testament to a long, unbroken cultural lineage that stretches back 1,000 years or more. This is why the debate matters so deeply. It is about more than identifying an animal. It is about deciding which story the land is telling, one of ancient indigenous innovation or one of remarkable colonial era adaptation. The desert guards this secret closely, leaving us to wonder if we are looking at a timeless spirit of the place or the shadow of a world forever changed. The stories passed down through generations hold a different kind of truth, one that lives in the voice and the memory. For the Mojave people, the world and its rules were established by the creator deity Mastamho. In their oral traditions, it is said that after forming the Colorado River and teaching the people how to live, Mastamho transformed into a giant fish eagle and flew away. But before his departure, he instructed the people to remember him and the laws he gave them. Many Mojave elders and cultural historians see a direct link between these foundational stories and the giant figures on the mesas. They are not abstract art, they are illustrations in the earth, perhaps depicting Mastamho himself in his various forms, or the giant beings who existed in that mythic time of creation. The human figure with outstretched arms might capture a moment of teaching or blessing, while the serene, reclining giant could represent the Creator's rest after shaping the world. The mountain lion is not merely an animal, it is Hatakulia, a powerful personage who assisted Mastamho. In this view, the entire site becomes a sacred text, a permanent record of the most important story the people possess, written not on pages that can burn, but on the land itself where it cannot be lost. Correlating these specific oral narratives with the silent archaeology of the Intaglios is a delicate and complex task. A story passed down for 50 generations is not a fixed transcript, it is a living river, adapting its course slightly with each telling while maintaining its essential flow. Details of place and description can shift over centuries. Furthermore, the deeply spiritual and proprietary nature of these stories means that their full versions are often not for public dissemination, held closely within the tribal community. This creates a gap between the archaeological record, which can describe the how and the when with growing precision, and the traditional knowledge which explains the why with profound depth. Science can date pottery shards and measure solstice alignments, but it cannot hear the prayers that were sung within the lines of the giant. It cannot access the intention in the hearts of the people who moved those stones. This is where oral history is not just complementary, it is indispensable. It provides the cultural context, the emotional and spiritual framework that turns a mysterious arrangement of cleared gravel into a meaningful human act. Without these stories, the Intaglios are a breathtaking technical achievement, a puzzle. With them, they become a chapter in an epic, a landmark in a spiritual geography that is still known and felt today. This bridging of science and tradition does not require one to disprove the other. They are two different languages describing the same profound reality. The archaeological timeline suggesting Patayan creation around 1,000 years ago fits seamlessly with the Mojave understanding that these are ancient works of their ancestors. The scientific theory of the site as a ritual center aligns perfectly with the traditional view of it as a sacred space where the people connected with the Creator. When we listen to both voices, a richer, more respectful understanding emerges. We begin to see the Intaglios not as abandoned relics of a lost culture, but as active participants in a living culture, their meaning sustained not by academic journals but by the enduring power of story. This partnership invites a humbling shift in perspective, asking us to value not just what can be measured and mapped, but what can be remembered and revered. It suggests that the true key to unlocking the desert's secret may not be found in a satellite image or a soil sample, but in listening to the echoes of the stories that have always lived here. The full majesty of the Blythe Intaglios remained a secret the Earth kept from itself for centuries. Their complete form was quite literally unimaginable from a human perspective. Before the 20th century, no single person could have ever witnessed the entire 170-foot human figure as a coherent image. The creators worked in faith, guided by ropes and stakes and a shared mental blueprint, trusting that their collective effort would coalesce into a giant only from a vantage point they could never physically occupy. This reality forces a profound philosophical shift in how we understand their purpose. If the art was made for human eyes, then its primary audience was not a viewer, but the community of participants themselves. The act of creation was the ritual, a walking prayer where every basket of stones carried was a devotional act. The finished product was almost secondary, a permanent echo of that communal effort left for the land and the spirits. The intended viewers, then, might truly have been the gods, the ancestors, or the celestial beings themselves, who could look down from the sky and see the gift laid out for them. This transforms the geoglyphs from a message meant to be read into an offering meant to be received, a gesture of reverence written on a scale only the divine could fully appreciate. The airplane changed everything. George Palmer's flight in 1932 did more than just rediscover the figures. It granted humanity the perspective that had been reserved for the sky. For the first time, we could see what the makers had envisioned in their minds. This aerial revolution continues today with even more powerful tools. Drones now hover silently above the mesas, capturing high-resolution images that reveal erosion and damage invisible from the ground. Satellite imagery maps the site in context with ancient river channels and trails, searching for patterns in the broader landscape. These technologies allow archaeologists to study the Intaglios with a god's eye view, measuring alignments and relationships with incredible precision. More importantly, they allow the public to appreciate this wonder from their own homes, creating a digital connection to a sacred space that physical visitation must carefully limit. Yet this modern perspective creates a curious paradox. We can now see the giants with a clarity their creators never could, but we are separated from them by the very glass screen or aerial photograph that provides the view. We gain the spectacle but lose the sensation of standing inside the lines, of feeling the sun and the weight of the stones that defined the original experience. The aerial view answers the question of what they look like, but in doing so, it deepens the mystery of what they truly meant to the hands that made them. It reminds us that some truths are not found in seeing the whole picture from a distance, but in understanding the faith required to build it one stone at a time without ever seeing it finished. The aerial view that solved one mystery inadvertently created another. In the decades following their rediscovery, as images of the sprawling desert giants entered the public consciousness, a tantalizing question took hold in popular culture. How could ancient peoples create precise, massive artwork intended for a view from the sky, unless someone from the sky was there to see it? This line of thinking crystallized into what is often called the ancient astronaut hypothesis. Proponents pointed to the Intaglios' grand scale and their incomprehensibility from the ground as definitive proof. They were not ritual sites or clan symbols, the argument went, but landing strips for alien spacecraft or perhaps navigational beacons left by extraterrestrial visitors to guide their return. This narrative found fertile ground in the mid-20th century, fueled by a burgeoning fascination with unidentified flying objects and popular books that wove together global archaeological sites into a single speculative story of cosmic contact. Television programs later amplified these ideas, presenting the geoglyphs alongside other global wonders as an unsolvable puzzle, implicitly suggesting that human ancestors lacked the capacity for such grand vision. The theory was seductive because it offered a simple, sensational answer to a complex human achievement, replacing the slow, difficult work of archaeology with the drama of cosmic intervention. For a public captivated by the space race and the unknown, it transformed the silent desert figures into artifacts of an interstellar conversation. Yet this interpretation rests on a profound and ultimately disrespectful assumption that the indigenous cultures of the Americas were incapable of the planning, coordination, and spiritual drive required to alter their own landscape on a monumental scale. The archaeological and anthropological rebuttal is clear, grounded, and celebrates human ingenuity. Scholars point to the elegant simplicity of the technique, clearing stones to reveal contrast, a method well within the technological reach of the Patayan people and their ancestors. The planning required, while sophisticated, is demonstrably human. Using ropes, stakes, and a master layout, teams could have transferred a small-scale design to the vast mesa with meticulous care. The purpose was rooted in their world, not ours or some imagined star-faring one. These geoglyphs fit seamlessly into a global pattern of human behavior, from the stone circles of Europe to the effigy mounds of the American Midwest, where communities have always invested immense labor in projects that served spiritual, social, or astronomical needs. The intaglios were not made for aliens to see from above. They were made for cultural reasons that required them to be placed upon the earth, with the aerial perspective being a magnificent byproduct of their sacred scale. To credit extraterrestrials is to ignore the tangible evidence of pottery, tools, and oral history, and to silence the profound story of the people who actually lived here. It dismisses their intelligence and their profound connection to the land, a connection so deep they literally wrote their beliefs into its skin. The true wonder of Blythe is not that it might be a message for beings from another world, but that it is a stunning testament to what human communities can achieve when united by a shared vision and a sacred purpose. That realization shifts our gaze from the stars back to the desert floor, to the hands that moved those stones, and to the enduring human need to make a mark that outlasts the individual, a need that requires no otherworldly explanation at all. The journey to meet these giants is itself a passage into a different world. Leaving the modern highway, your vehicle turns onto a graded dirt road that stretches toward a horizon of low, dusty mesas. The landscape opens up, a vast expanse of creosote bushes and cracked earth under an immense blue sky. The only sounds are the crunch of tires on gravel and the whisper of a dry wind. This remoteness is part of the experience, a necessary decompression from the modern world before you encounter the ancient one. After a few slow, bumpy miles, a simple wooden sign and a small parking area mark the entrance to the Blythe Intaglios Archaeological District. Here, the Bureau of Land Management has installed interpretive panels that offer the basic facts, the theories, and most importantly, the rules for being a guest in this sacred space. A network of protective fencing cordons off the figures, not to keep you out but to guide you along designated viewing paths. This is where the pilgrimage truly begins on foot. You follow a sandy trail up a gentle rise, the desert heat pressing down, your eyes scanning the ground, and then you see it. At first, it's just a shallow trench at your feet, a line of darker stones bordering an area of lighter soil. You step closer to the fence, following the line with your eyes as it curves away. Your perspective struggles to make sense of it. You trace the line to what must be a shoulder, then an elbow. You take a few steps along the path and another line comes into view, defining a massive leg. Piece by piece, your brain assembles the giant. It is an act of slow revelation, the opposite of the instant recognition from an aerial photo. You are reconstructing the vision of the creators, one careful glance at a time. The scale is what finally steals your breath. You realize the rounded form at the far end of the clearing is the giant's head, and it is easily the size of a school bus. To stand at its foot is to feel profoundly small, yet intimately connected to the immense patience and shared purpose that brought this being into existence. The silence here is not empty, it is full of presence. This is not a museum exhibit, it is a living landscape held in trust. Every visitor carries a responsibility. The marked paths are there for a vital reason. Your footsteps, however careful, erode the fragile cleared lines and displace the border stones that have held their place for centuries. Climbing on the figures is unthinkable, a violation of both archaeological integrity and deep cultural respect. The principle is simple: leave no trace. Take only photographs and let the only thing you leave behind be your awe. To visit the Blythe Intaglios is to participate in a quiet pact between past and present, to witness a masterpiece on the condition that you help ensure its whisper can be heard for 1,000 years to come. Protecting these ancient lines is a quiet, continuous science. The Bureau of Land Management, or BLM, acts as the site's primary guardian, its rangers and archaeologists engaged in a perpetual, low-profile campaign against time and human impact. The most visible tool in this effort is the simple wooden fence surrounding each figure. This barrier is not meant to be imposing, but instructive, gently steering visitors along designated paths to viewing platforms. From there, you can observe the giants clearly without your footsteps compacting the soil or dislodging the critical border stones that define the forms. This is the first, most fundamental compromise, trading unrestricted access for long-term survival. But the work extends far beyond these fences. Rangers conduct regular patrols, monitoring for any signs of vandalism or new vehicle tracks. They document the site's condition with detailed photographs, creating a visual record that can reveal subtle changes over months and years, a slow-motion study of decay and stability. One of their most delicate tasks is combating the desert's own natural forces. When rare but powerful rainstorms sweep across the mesas, they can scour the shallow trenches, washing away the precious lighter soil. To combat this, preservationists sometimes perform careful reburial, using a mix of sand and gravel to fill in minor gullies, a process that must mimic the original materials to maintain the site's integrity. They also reseat stones that have been kicked or washed out of alignment, a painstaking effort to keep the giant's edges sharp against the blurring effect of wind and weather. Every action is measured, minimal, and reversible whenever possible, guided by a principle to do no harm while gently resisting the inevitable. This creates a constant tension, a balancing act between two vital goals. The first is preservation, sealing the site away from all disturbance. The second is education, allowing people to connect with this wonder and understand its significance. If the intaglios are completely inaccessible, they become an abstract idea, losing their power to inspire stewardship. But if access is unchecked, love for the site can literally love it to death. The BLM's management plan walks this tightrope, providing just enough infrastructure, like informative signs and defined parking, to facilitate respectful visitation while the land itself and the fences do the protective work. This model acknowledges that the greatest threat is often not malice, but innocent ignorance, and that the best defense is a visitor who leaves informed and awestruck, committed to protecting what they have just witnessed. This collaborative spirit extends beyond government agencies, weaving together science and tradition in a powerful partnership for the future. The desert giants have long outgrown their original creators, taking on a second life in the modern imagination. They are no longer just the province of archaeologists and tribal historians. They have become a canvas for our own cultural dreams, a symbol of ancient American mystery that resonates far beyond the Colorado Desert. This transformation from artifact to icon began almost as soon as the aerial photographs were published, capturing a public hungry for stories of lost worlds and unsolved puzzles. The very fact that their full form was invisible to their makers made them irresistibly enigmatic, a perfect metaphor for the hidden depths of the continent's past. Writers and filmmakers quickly saw their narrative potential. The intaglios began to appear in speculative fiction, not as themselves, but as templates for even more mysterious creations, ancient landing sites for alien visitors or maps to forgotten civilizations in stories that blended the real with the fantastical. While the ancient astronaut theory may falter as science, it thrives as modern mythology, proof of the figure's power to spark stories that seek to explain the inexplicable. This process turns the geoglyphs into a kind of cultural Rorschach test, where we see reflected our own fascinations with the unknown, the ancient, and the cosmic. For contemporary artists, particularly those working in the American Southwest, the intaglios offer a profound lesson in scale, impermanence, and dialogue with the landscape. The monumental earthworks of artists like Michael Heiser, who carved massive complexes into the Nevada desert, or Robert Smithson, who created the iconic spiral jetty in Utah's Great Salt Lake, walk in the footsteps of those ancient makers. They engage in the same fundamental act, using the earth as both medium and message, creating art that cannot be owned or housed, that exists in conversation with the forces of erosion and time. The Blythe figures stand as ancestral prototypes for this entire land art movement, demonstrating that the impulse to make a grand, environmental statement is not a modern innovation but a deeply human tradition. Local painters and photographers are continually drawn to the site, not just to document but to interpret, capturing the way the low morning light rakes across the trenches or how the figures seem to emerge from the haze of a desert afternoon. Their work translates the silent giants into new forms, keeping them alive in the regional consciousness and introducing them to audiences who may never make the pilgrimage to the remote mesas. Perhaps the most significant modern role of the intaglios is as a pillar of regional identity. For the communities around Blythe, these are not distant relics, they are local landmarks, a point of pride, and a unique claim to historical significance. They feature on town websites and visitor brochures, a draw for the curious traveler seeking something beyond the interstate. School children learn about them, local historians give talks, and they serve as a tangible connection to a deep, pre-colonial past that counters the narrative of the West as an empty frontier. They symbolize endurance, a message that in a place of extreme hardship, people not only survived, they created breathtaking beauty. This local stewardship is crucial. It creates a community of protectors who understand that the giants are part of their home story. The geoglyphs have become a quiet symbol for the entire Colorado River region, a reminder that this arid landscape, often seen as barren, holds layers of meaning and memory in its very soil. Ultimately, the Blythe Intaglios exist in a continuous dialogue between then and now. Each theory proposed by an archaeologist, each story told by a tribal elder, each painting by a local artist, and each awestruck gaze from a first-time visitor adds another layer to their meaning. They are not static artifacts frozen in a museum case. They are active participants in culture, changing as we change. The questions we ask of them today about astronomy, community, and symbolism are different from the questions asked 50 years ago and will be different again 50 years hence. This evolving conversation is their true legacy, ensuring they are never finished, never fully solved. They remain a perpetual source of wonder because they so elegantly defy a single, simple explanation, inviting every generation to look, to wonder, and to add its own voice to the story written in the earth. This living relationship raises a final, forward-looking consideration. As our tools for investigation grow ever more powerful, what new questions will we be able to ask, and what might the giants finally reveal when we learn to listen in a different way? The desert holds its secrets close, and the giants offer no final answers, only a deeper silence filled with more profound questions. We are left standing at the edge of the cleared lines, staring into the gaps in our own understanding. Who exactly moved these stones? While the Patayan culture and the ancestors of the Mojave and Quechan peoples are the strongest candidates, we cannot name a specific village or a singular visionary artist. The creation was a communal whisper, and the individual voices have been lost to time. Pinpointing a precise date remains equally elusive, trapped between the broad brackets of archaeology and the timeless flow of oral tradition. Are these figures 400, 800, or 2,000 years old? The desert pavement refuses to tell. Their specific function continues to dance just out of reach. Were they a ritual stage for solstice ceremonies, a territorial marker for river travelers, or a celestial map frozen in the soil? They could have been all these things at once, their meaning shifting with the seasons and the generations that used them. The arrangement of the figures themselves poses another riddle. Why this particular grouping, a serene giant, an active giant, a mountain lion, and a spiral? These are not random choices. They feel like chapters in a story, or perhaps members of a sacred family, but the narrative that connects them has faded, leaving only the stark, beautiful images behind. And perhaps the most tantalizing question of all lingers on the horizon. The Colorado Desert is vast and largely unexplored. If a pilot flying a mail route could stumble upon these giants in 1932, what might modern technology, like LiDAR scanning from aircraft, reveal hidden under creosote bushes or buried in silt? Are the Blythe Intaglios the only ones, or are they merely the most visible members of a much larger, hidden family of Earth drawings waiting silently for their moment of rediscovery? The honest truth is that archaeology, for all its tools, may never provide the definitive, satisfying answers we seek. The original context is gone. The last participant in the ceremony took their meaning with them. Yet it is precisely this enduring state of mystery that grants the site its lasting power. If we had a simple answer, a plaque that said this was made by this person on this date for this reason, the giants would become a solved equation, their magic reduced to a historical fact. Instead, their ambiguity is an invitation. It asks us to engage, to wonder, to bring our own imagination and reverence into the silent dialogue between the land and the sky. The unanswered questions are not a failure of science, they are the legacy of the art itself, ensuring that the Blythe Intaglios remain not a closed book, but an open conversation, one that will continue to captivate and mystify for as long as the desert wind blows across their ancient, waiting forms. This ancient impulse to write upon the earth did not vanish with the Patayan people. It simply slept for centuries, waiting for a new generation to hear its call. In the late 1960s and 70s, a radical art movement emerged, one that turned its back on galleries and museums to engage directly with the raw materials of the planet. They called it land art, and its pioneers, artists like Michael Heiser and Robert Smithson, were unknowingly speaking the same visual language as the creators of the Blythe Intaglios 1,000 years before. Heiser's monumental work, Double Negative, involved blasting and moving 240,000 tons of rock to create two massive trenches facing each other across a remote Nevada canyon. Robert Smithson's spiral jetty is a 1,500-foot-long coil of black basalt rocks extending into the pink waters of Utah's Great Salt Lake. These were not sculptures placed in the landscape. They were conversations with the landscape itself, using its own substance as the medium. The parallels are profound and undeniable. Just like the Intaglios, these modern earthworks are often situated in remote, inhospitable places far from urban centers. They demand a pilgrimage. You cannot casually view double negative. You must journey into the desert, a commitment that transforms the act of seeing into a personal experience. This remoteness is not an obstacle. It is essential to the meaning, stripping away the noise of civilization to force a direct, visceral encounter with scale and place. Both the ancient and the modern works engage in a deep dialogue with impermanence. The creators of the intaglios knew their figures would be slowly softened by wind and flood, yet they built them anyway, accepting the land's role as a co-author in the artwork's lifespan. Smithson embraced this completely, designing the spiral jetty to be submerged, resurface, and be crusted with salt crystals, its form constantly changing with the lake's fluctuating levels. Heiser's trenches are subject to gradual erosion and siltation. These artists, separated by a millennium, shared a common understanding that the most powerful art is not static, but exists in a state of becoming, shaped by natural forces over time. Most fundamentally, both traditions operate on a scale that deliberately challenges human perception. Standing at the edge of the spiral jetty, you cannot see its full, graceful form. You are walking its curve, experiencing it linearly. At the intaglio, you are inside a giant's footprint, assembling its image piece by piece. The complete, breathtaking composition is reserved for the aerial view, a perspective that transforms the work into something new and whole. This shared technique creates a humbling effect, reminding the viewer of their own smallness within the vastness of geography and deep time. In this light, the Blythe Intaglios can be seen not as mysterious outliers, but as the original American land art. They are the foundational chapter in a continent-long tradition of marking the earth with meaning on a monumental scale. The modern land artists were not inspired by these specific geoglyphs. Most were unaware of them at the time, but they were tapping into the same primal human drive to leave a mark that speaks not to a single person in a room, but to the sky, the earth, and the future. They prove that the desire to collaborate with the landscape, to make art that is of a place rather than simply in it, is a timeless thread in the human story. This realization reframes the desert giants. They are no longer isolated artifacts of a lost culture, but active participants in an ongoing artistic conversation that stretches from the ancient past into our present moment, asking us what we, in our own time, might choose to say to the land, and what we are willing to build that we ourselves may never fully see. Their silent vigil across the desert mesas is a testament to the enduring power of a question. The Blythe Intaglios are a mystery not because they are broken, but because they are whole, a complete message from the past delivered in a language we have not yet fully deciphered. They teach us that human creativity is not bound by technology, that a community with nothing but stones and shared purpose can collaborate with the landscape on a godlike scale. They remind us that spirituality can be written directly onto the earth, a permanent prayer for rain, for hunt, for connection to the cosmos. These giants are a profound lesson in our relationship with the land, not as a resource to be used, but as a partner in storytelling, a canvas for our deepest beliefs. The debates over their origins, whether Patayan or older, and the beautiful synergy between archaeological clues and living oral traditions only deepen their significance. They are not owned by a single theory, but are held in trust by many, from federal land managers to tribal nations, all united in the quiet, ongoing work of preservation. To stand before them is to feel the weight of deep time and the flicker of human ingenuity. They are a timeless reminder that the American landscape is not an empty space waiting for history to begin, but a palimpsest, a document written and rewritten over millennia, holding stories in its very soil. The next time you look out over a vast, open space, remember the Blythe Intaglios. Remember that what seems barren might be inscribed with meaning, waiting only for a shift in perspective to be revealed. We encourage you to learn more, to plan a respectful visit if you can, and to carry this sense of wonder into your own observations of the world. What other stories are written on the land around you, waiting to be seen? Share your thoughts and discoveries in the comments below. But the story of these desert giants is far from over, and your perspective is now a part of it. We want to hear from you. Which theory about the Intaglios speaks to you the most? Is it the idea of a sacred ritual site, a celestial calendar written in stone, or a powerful territorial marker for a bustling ancient world? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and join the conversation with other curious minds. If journeys into the deep past captivate you, be sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell. Our next exploration will pull back the curtain on another stunning American mystery, one hidden not in the open desert but deep within a labyrinth of underground caverns. Until then, picture this final view, the last light of a desert sunset stretching the long shadows of the giants across the mesa, their silent forms fading into the twilight, holding their secrets for just a little while longer.